You ever wanted to start a label?
Hell no. No, but probably the reason for my answer is because I don't have the bandwidth or capacity to do that. Um, if I didn't have any of the current responsibilities that I do maintain, perhaps. Um, I prefer to work with, support, and amplify artists through the avenues in which I'm already doing that. And I prefer that simply because when you're the label, you are perpetually the bad guy.
Hmm.
And that's not a great position to be in if you are a true artist advocate. A record executive once told me, you know, the artists who are unhappy are very public about their unhappiness.
Yeah.
They're on social media complaining about what their labels aren't doing for them. And that's true. But for every artist that is unhappy with their label, there are plenty of artists who are very happy with their label. The difference is they're not on social media talking about how much they love their label. Um, so those folks do exist, but they are few and far between. And so, no, definitely don't want to start a label. But I do feel like I'm helping artists whether they are signed or not.
Welcome to the Words Matter Pod with Akil Pinnock, a podcast dedicated to wordsmiths and storytellers. Today's guest is the co-founder and senior vice president of global operations and head of artist and label services at Audiomack, an artist-first music streaming and audio discovery platform that allows artists to upload music and fans to stream and download songs. He's also one of the founders of DJ Booth, a mixtape hosting streaming service, and later an industry leader in music journalism that entered into a content partnership with Audiomack in 2020. This man is one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter. Yes, I still call it Twitter, not X, because of his presence as a music industry insider. I don't know. I just was on Twitter one day and I started seeing your post, and you sounded really knowledgeable. And then I clicked your profile and I saw your bio. I'm like, oh, this guy is official. He's not just like a regular guy who knows a lot of things. Like he's, actually in the industry as a primary resource. Um, but yeah, I mean, I consider this man an expert, and I'm sure plenty other people do. But not just about expertise, but also he does a great job of breaking things down to the layman, so the layman can understand, just in a simpler way. And for casual fans, and I think that's very important in this day of misinformation and might I say propaganda. Um, he's conducted over 500 interviews with artists and music industry professionals such as J. Cole, Big Sean, Rick Ross, John Legend, Nipsey Hussle, DJ Khaled, Anderson .Paak, among others. And as a result of his contributions to the music industry, in 2022, he was selected by the Recording Academy to be a part of its new member class. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Brian Z. Zisook.
Thank you so much, Akil, for having me. I do see myself as just a regular guy,
Yeah.
but it's good to know that what I'm putting out into the world is being received well.
Yeah, no, it's very much needed. Twitter is I still love Twitter to this day just because of the jokes and people have a lot of smart humor and stuff. But of course, there's like the dark side of the internet where people are just haters, and then we have this stan culture that that exists where people feel like they can't just like all music; they just have to like a certain artist, and they can't just think that two things can exist at the same time.
Yeah, it's
So
very unhealthy.
yeah,
It's very unhealthy. And for as much as I don't like that either, I think I'm in the same boat you are in, which is as someone who has been on the platform for so long, I can't leave. I feel like my duty at this point is to stick around and just continue to run headfirst into a brick wall trying to educate the masses.
yeah, and making it your mission to educate can I feel like, in my personal experience, can be very frustrating because I feel like, there's a large percentage of the population that loves to learn, but there's also a large percentage of the population that likes to talk but doesn't like to listen. So, I think that's how a lot of misinformation can be spread.
That's fine. I don't disagree with you. I am putting out that information for those who are receptive to it, who do want to learn. Uh, it helps both artists who traditionally have had a difficult time finding this information from knowledgeable and respected sources, but also there's obviously this growing interest amongst fans and consumers who want a better understanding of how the industry actually works. Of course, we would all love it if the fans just did the fanning and
Yeah.
supported the artists and listened to the music and didn't concern themselves with recording contracts and record label politics. But that's not the case. Can't put the cap back on that bottle. So
Yep.
that's fine. That's to just lean in and help them better understand how all of this actually functions.
Yeah, you're doing great work. So, anyway,
Thank you.
let me stop complaining. But how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I think I have a little bit of the winter blues, some seasonal depression. I spend my time back and forth between Chicago and New York, two cold weather cities where it's pitch black first thing in the morning, gray most of the day, and then again pitch black fairly early. There hasn't been a ton of precipitation, but it's been very cold, and I'm just ready for spring and some sunshine.
Yeah, it's just actually funny because I'm in Southern California. I'm from New York, but I'm in Los Angeles, and it's raining, which it doesn't
You
really.
need it. Like
Yeah,
you need it.
because the city was pretty scary out here.
I'm
Um,
glad you're okay.
yeah, no, thank you. So, who are you?
I'm Brian Zisook. Everybody in the business calls me Z. Um, it's funny. I told someone this the other day. They said, "Do you prefer Brian or Z?" And I said, I prefer whatever you're comfortable with, but I should let you know that outside of my wife and my family, my grandmother, my father, my brother, no one calls me Brian. I'll be at a doctor's office in the waiting room, and the nurse will come out and she'll say, Brian. And I won't move because I'm so used to hearing Z the entirety of the day. And then I'll have this moment about 10 seconds later. Oh, they're calling me. I should probably get up now. But to answer your question in a more in-depth manner, I'm someone who's been a part of music in some capacity for over 20 years now. And that wasn't initially what I was looking to do. I went to school for broadcast journalism. I wanted to talk on the radio, and it didn't necessarily have to be FM. I just wanted to get paid to talk for a living. My mother used to say, "You talk a lot. You should find someone who's willing to pay you for that."
Hmm.
And so that's what I thought I wanted to do. But that didn't work out for me. I was in radio very briefly after I graduated from Illinois State University, and I hated it. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, looking at that as a career growing up. And I'm so glad that I removed myself from that path and moved into digital publishing and journalism and now music streaming because it gives me a great sense of fulfillment. I get to work with recording artists and writers and producers and executives every day. And I believe that we're making a change in the business and one for the positive.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're still doing journalism though at the same time. So, but just in a different form, which is still pretty cool. And you still speak to the masses, like we're doing right now, and you use your voice, your digital voice, on Twitter as well. Um, how did you get into digital publishing and music business stuff?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. You're right, and it never hurts to hear that reminder. Um, when I was wrapping up school at Illinois State University, I was working at WZND, which was the student-run radio station, and we would conduct interviews with artists throughout the week and then air them on our programs on the weekend. And, I was honest with myself. There was probably like 50 people listening to our radio program on the weekend. And we put in hours worth of work to prep for, conduct, and edit these interviews. And my thought process was that's a lot of time to spend for only 50 people to listen. There's got to be a better way. I tried to build a website of my own. This is back in 2005. But that's just not how my brain functions. I didn't know background in web design or coding. And so I connected with a gentleman who ended up becoming my business partner, Dave Mackley. And he and I grew DJ Booth as a home initially for my interviews. And then that over time led to both short and long form journalism. And we grew to over 8 million page views a month. We had less than 5 full-time team members, and I'm very fortunate that we were able to succeed in that blog era at a time where there was so much competition for eyeballs. This is obviously pre-streaming.
Yeah. Oh man, the blog era. That was a. How do you? It's like the right place, the right time for for people to get into music during that time because I was a teenager throughout the entire blog era. It started, I would say, it started around '06 when I was 13, and probably ended right before I turned 20.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always wished I was an adult during that time period, just so I could really be outside and experience the music that I was falling in love with.
It was incredible. And how you felt on the receiving end is how I felt on the creative end. Um, we had the opportunity to taste make. We had the opportunity to lead artist discovery, and we're never going to see that again. Obviously, the streaming era has brought upon an entirely different avenue for artist discovery, but there was just something really authentic and wholesome about that 7 to 8 year period that I don't think that we're going to be able to capture ever again. But it is undoubtedly my favorite moment in time as far as my career is concerned.
Yeah. Um, when did your hip hop journey begin?
As a kid, I mean, as a white kid growing up in the Chicagoland suburbs, I was drawn into hip hop culture. I mean, I was obsessed. These artists were like larger than life
Yeah.
to me, and couldn't get enough of it. Told all my friends about it. We would listen to it. We played it at school dances and bar and bat mitzvahs and on the weekends. And I'd go to the library and check out tapes and
Mhm.
CDs. Um, I would record music videos onto VHS from BET and MTV. I mean, I feel very fortunate having grown up in the late 80s and early 90s during the golden age of hip hop before it reached peak commercialism. Uh, it was fantastic,
Yeah.
and really shaped the genesis chapter of what has been my story in music.
It was really a labor of love to be a hip hop fan, to be a music fan back then, right? Because you had to incorporate. First of all, you had to buy music, right? So you had to
Hmm.
spend your money, that your hard earned money, or if you're a kid, maybe money you earned from chores or whatever part time job you had. Um, then you had to, if you're an adult, you're leaving the house and you're incorporating buying music into your. It's almost like an errand. It becomes a part of your errands because go to the grocery store, then you go to wherever there's some Tower Records or whatever record store is selling music, and you buy it. And you know, CDs. I don't know about cassettes; is a little before me, but CDs could be a little expensive. Like some CDs are over $20. The double out.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't remember this. For a period of time, Blockbuster the video rental enterprise that has since gone out of business, they had a sister store called Blockbuster Music,
Oh wow.
and you could go into the store, take any CD that you wanted off the shelf, hand it to an employee at the store. They would unseal it, hand it back to you, and you could go into a listening booth and under headphones preview the album. And there was a Blockbuster Music probably 5 minute walk away from my house. And so I would go to Blockbuster Music 4 to 5 times a week,
Yeah.
spend a few hours. I'd grab, you know, Beastie Boys, Foxy Brown, EPMD, Jay Z, DMX. I just pull them all off the
Yeah.
shelves. I hand it to the guy, and he'd be like, "All right, this guy's going to be here for a few hours," and I would listen, and then I would grab a few and take them home with my allowance money, and build up my CD collection.
One of my greatest regrets in recent history is throwing away all my CDs. And I had to, I felt like I had to because I made the trip, the move across the country from New York to LA. And even though I had nowhere to play my CDs, because even when my car doesn't even have a CD player, um, but it was so many CDs. I mean, CDs in the in the packaging, and CDs in a CD booklet, and I had to throw them out. And now when I look at the world that we live in, where we're essentially leasing music, you know, you don't even really own any kind of content. You don't own your music. You don't own a movie. I remember going to somebody's house and thinking they had so much money because they had a large DVD collection, a large CD collection. You could tell this person really loved media. Um, but yeah, that is to this day I regret it. But one day I'm gonna build my collection again.
Yeah, I still have all of mine. Um, as a matter of fact, I also have a fairly significant vinyl collection as well. Um, I wish I spent more time consuming the music on vinyl, but in you know, of course, like this, like the co-founder of the streaming service is going to say that he spends most of his time consuming on a streaming service.
Yeah.
But just having it, it's almost like a safety blanket, it's peace of mind
Yes.
in a future world if streaming phases out or there's contentiousness between services and license and rights holders. How do you listen then? You
Exactly.
you can't if you don't have it.
Yeah, like you're just beholden to corporations and
Hmm.
whatever decisions they make. And a lot of these guys don't even love art at all. Um, you ever wanted to start a label?
Oh no. No, but probably the reason for my answer is because I don't have the bandwidth or capacity to do that. Um, if I didn't have any of the current responsibilities that I do maintain, perhaps um, I prefer to work with, support, and amplify artists through the avenues in which I'm already doing that. And I prefer that simply because when you're the label, you are perpetually the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a great position to be in if you are a true artist advocate. A record executive once told me, you know, the artists who are unhappy are very public about their unhappiness.
Yeah.
They're on social media complaining about what their labels aren't doing for them. And that's true. But for every artist that is unhappy with their label, there are plenty of artists who are very happy with their label. The difference is they're not on social media talking about how much they love their label. Um, so those folks do exist, but they are few and far between. And so, no, definitely don't want to start a label. But I do feel like I'm helping artists whether they are signed or not.
Yeah. When you started Audiomack, what was your vision?
At the time, that was like peak mixtape era. a lot of artists were using free file sharing services like Zippy Share, Lime Links, Mega Upload. I'm sure you remember them
Mhm.
to disseminate their mixtapes. Of course, those services were never built with the intention of handling distribution for artists.
Yeah.
It was a poor experience on both sides, right? So the artist would upload, that link would eventually die. They would had no ability to track stats, engagement, demographic information, build up an audience, couldn't capture phone numbers or email addresses. And then on the user side, you had pop-up ads, malware, terrible experience.
Oh
And
God.
so Audiomack effectively was a solution to the problem that we identified, which was offer a service where artists could upload, not charge them, right? Because there were other options in the marketplace, but dependent upon your plan, there was a cap. Like on SoundCloud, if you wanted to upload a certain number of tracks that total a certain number of hours,
Mhm.
you'd have to pay them. But these artists didn't have budgets. There was no money. And so we felt like if you provide the tools for free and the artists see success on your service, they become your marketing team. They become your street team.
Hmm.
And it is far more valuable for an artist who uses your service and sees success to champion you. It's just more authentic and more genuine than it is for us to say, like, hey, rah, rah, rah,
Yeah.
look what we're doing.
How long did it take you to develop that, right? To develop this idea that, you know, the people that use the service to listen to music become your promotional team, without them even knowing it.
Well, we had been trialing this on DJ Booth. So DJ Booth was hosting artist mixtapes, and then we would also either interview them or write about them. So our thought process was back in the day, artists would disseminate what's called an EPK. And effectively, it's your bio, press clippings, preview of your music, links to all of your other platforms and socials. But for us, it was an opportunity to make your music available for stream, free download. We would interview you and write up a story about the release.
Mm.
That way, it contextualizes discovery, right? So someone finds you, they listen, and while they're listening, they can read about you. But we realized that that wasn't DJ Booth's core competency. We did not have the infrastructure in place at DJ Booth to do that in volume. And so Audiomack was spawned as an entirely separate business with the sole intention of doing that. We ideated on it in 2011. We launched it as a desktop website in 2012. By 2015, we had our first app on Android and iOS. And now here we are 13 years later, and we have 40 million monthly active users globally. We are the number one streaming service in most of Africa and the Caribbean, across the diaspora. We're a top 10 app here in the United States, and really excited about what the future holds.
In 2012, that wasn't that long ago. So, I mean, you guys have seen a lot of success. I mean, it probably feels like a long time to you because you created.
Feels like forever.
Yeah. But for 2012, I mean, you survived pretty much the tail end of the blog era, and into the SoundCloud era, or well, let me say Audiomack era because I'm talking to you.
It's fine.
But the SoundCloud era rap, and now the streaming era, and you're thriving in the streaming era. So, I mean, 2012 is a short period of time for me for a new business, and I would like to add that I used Audiomack when I was in college. I was going to UMass Amherst, and I would record my radio shows, and then I would upload them to Audiomack. Um, and I did it because of what you mentioned with being able to upload an unlimited amount of files. So I uploaded.
See, it
Yeah,
worked.
it works. It works. But the late because I was playing unlicensed music, on the show that a lot of the episodes got taken down. But I expected that though.
Apologies, that's out of our hands.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Nah, that's all good. It's all good. But how do you to just like kind of dwell on that a little bit for the other creatives who might have a radio show or something like that that's playing unlicensed music, like how do you go about uploading music on a streaming service like Audiomack without getting your music taken down by the big three?
Yeah, so Audiomack is a UGC licensed hybrid service, meaning we have over 400 rights holders who have licensing agreements with us and deliver product to the service through a feed delivery system. But also, we allow for artists and content creators to create an account and upload directly without utilizing a distributor or a label. And this is so valuable because so many creatives begin their journey pre-label, pre-distro while they're still figuring all of this out. Now, if you are a independent creator and you're not working with a rights holder, you can create an account and you can begin uploading. However, the uploads cannot contain copywritten music
Yeah.
that is recognized as being registered to any number of copyright holders, which is important to protect their content. What is my recommendation? Really, there's no way to circumvent the audio recognition system that we have in place at Audiomack. I know that if you are a creative or a podcaster, there are licenses that you can obtain that
Hmm.
would give you permission to utilize copywritten works within a show, a program, a podcast. But even then, if those licenses are not obtained in the correct order, they could still end up getting flagged and removed. And we understand how frustrating that can be. But for anyone watching your podcast who's in the same boat, if that does happen to you and you do have the proper licenses in place, reach out to us and we will work with you and the rights holder to restore any music or works that were taken down.
Now that's good to know. I don't know. This is 2018, 20. Yeah, this is 2018 I'm talking about. So I don't know if those things existed back then.
It's crazy is never before in the history of music and technology has there been so much disruption so frequently in a condensed period of time. Disruption and change used to take place over decades,
Yeah.
decades. And now every 6 months, the business is in a fundamentally different place. And the way that, UGC or derivative content or AI is viewed is constantly changing. And it's what's frustrating is it's a lot for us to keep up with. And this is our business and
Yeah.
our industry. So it would be an impossible ask for the common artist or the common user to be as aware.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, you don't know what you don't know. You know, I'm on the radio. I'm on a late night hip hop show. The show's going into 1 a.m. And then you're a full time student as well. I mean, you're not thinking about, you're just excited to play music and talk on the radio. You're not really thinking about, even though I'm aware that everything is legal, but and everything is related to copyrights and trademarks and stuff like that. But it's like whatever. If it gets taken down, it gets taken down. But I just wanted to get my stuff out there, so it is what it is. You had a pin tweet where you explain in a video why you care so much about music, specifically hip hop, and you explain in verbatim. I knew from day one that I'm a visitor in hip hop. I'm on the outside, and I need to be able to contribute positively to the culture in order for me to feel good about the work that I do. That's the reason why I knew from the beginning that something DJ Booth would never do when it published articles was cover gossip or rumors or celebrity news. We were completely uninterested in who was dating whom and who got caught up with the gun charge. That was something that someone else could cover. We wanted nothing to do with that. There are a lot of white people in hip hop and in hip hop media who, honestly been there for a long time, but it's a little different now because anyone can make themselves a member of the media as a streamer or a podcaster. Um, what would you say to the white people in hip hop media who don't share those same values and integrity?
Um, you have to question why you're doing what you're doing. I do believe, having done this for so long, that there are a lot of great people who are white who are have been and continue to cover um, hip hop, broadly speaking, both the music and the individuals. And I'd like to believe that they do have the best of intentions, and that this does come from a place of love, like that they fell in love with the music
Yeah,
and the practitioners, just like me, at a very early age, and that the idea of being a part of the culture that they grew up a part of um, is either fascinating or exciting to them. They just, to quote you from a couple of minutes ago, like they don't know what they don't know, and they just are handling it
yeah,
inappropriately. That's what I want to believe. I also know for a fact that there are an incredible number of individuals who operate within the media
yeah.
landscape who their sole mission is to create conversation and generate clicks.
Regardless.
And yeah. And so I would ask anyone who's in this business to look themselves in the mirror and ask, like, why are you doing this? And ultimately, I got to sleep at night. I want to feel good about the work that I do. I've worked tirelessly for 2+ decades to build up a positive reputation. That means something to me. I don't know that it means something to the folks that you are alluding to who haven't followed the same path or trajectory that I have.
Yeah. And I believe that too. What you said about, you believing that um a lot of these guys did have good intentions in the beginning and did, really fall in love with the culture. But I think a lot of guys, they have the cultural awareness. They love the music, but they also have uh, a high level of tech savvy. And then
Mhm.
they realized early how to monetize the internet, and you combine that with what they were originally covering, and then they see that the gossip and the sensationalism is lucrative. So then they lean into that, and before you know it, you become a gossip page. And you didn't even know that's what you wanted to become. That's what I believe.
And and we saw that happen 13, 14 years ago. A lot of we'll call them like traditional hip hop media platforms began covering all of the items that you read off from my quote that we refused to.
Mhm.
Pages like Hip Hop DX and Hot New Hip Hop
Yeah,
and others, they started covering everything. And there's a reason for that, is because traditional music coverage and a lot of what we produced at DJ Booth, which was educational content,
hmm,
it doesn't generate the same number of page views that the gossip and the rumors do. And ultimately, if you're maintaining any sort of channel or website, you're going to get the lion's share of your revenue from eyeballs and clicks.
yeah,
And so a lot of them, they were faced with a decision: either pivot to what generates eyeballs and clicks or die. And a lot of them were comfortable pivoting to what generates eyeballs and clicks, which is the bullshit.
yeah,
We were not. I would have rather folded DJ Booth than ever gone down that path.
yeah. No, I mean, it's difficult, and it really shows. It separates um who has integrity from who doesn't. And I'm sure a lot of those guys would probably argue their case. But I mean, I think the general public recognizes like what direction people are going towards, and what their intentions are. Um, so on the Label Machine podcast, you spoke about the difference between Audiomack and your closest competitor, SoundCloud, who charges creators and users a monthly subscription. unlike Audiomack, which is free and creators have access to their analytics. What I'm curious about is the fact that Audiomack and SoundCloud used to only have independent music available for streaming, and now commercial music is available on both platforms, just like Apple Music and Spotify. Are the payouts to the artists comparable to the other major DSPs, since music is basically free?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly the way that a lot of people look at it. So in order for us to continue to grow, we really had no choice but to secure licensing agreements with all of the major rights holders. And the value here, there's a lot of value, but in particular, a lot of the major rights holders have independent distribution arms. For example, UMG bought InGrooves. InGrooves merged into Virgin Music. Virgin Music works with hundreds of labels and thousands of artists. And Warner purchased ADA.
Yeah,
ADA has hundreds of label clients who work with thousands of artists. The same can be said with Sony, who
for
purchased The
sure.
Orchard and AWAL, right? So a lot of these artists were already working with us directly. And then once we established these licensing agreements, it allowed them to continue to have their music available on the service for an ever growing audience. Um, it's really important that people understand the notable artists are a draw for most music consumers who are extremely passive, meaning they're not discovery driven. They're not looking for names of artists that they are unfamiliar with.
Mhm.
They have their favorites. And so to not have their music is to push them away. And
Yeah,
so you need Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole and Drake on your service so that the user who wants their music can also find that brand new up and coming independent developing act that they weren't previously familiar with. Of note, our audience is not like SoundCloud's, it's not like any of the other major DSPs. Our audience is 94% multicultural and 91% under 34. So we are extremely young and we have an audience that, unlike other DSPs, very likely has limited access to disposable income, no credit or debit, hard capped data plans, and unreliable Wi Fi or no access to Wi Fi at home. And so inherently, they are presented with a challenge. They cannot easily stream music because they can't put a credit card on file or they have some sort of technological issue at hand.
Mhm.
And so for us, we wanted to more so democratize the access to this music. And fortunately, all of our rights holder partners understand that.
Yeah.
They understand that if you capture that audience early, they'll grow with you. And so I view it as a benefit to all.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. Those specific analytics about your majority of your fan base being 35 and under, which is incredible because that's you really just capture the millennial generation and all of Gen Z. Um, and I would say I don't know about all the other streamers, but I would say they probably have that too. But the advantage you guys have is that you have a very large international presence. And I remember being in Jamaica in 2015, the summer that Apple Music came out, and Apple Music wasn't available in Jamaica. So that just made me think about all the other places in the Caribbean, all the other developing nations that didn't have access to the subscription based DSPs that now have, they don't really have access to every hip hop album. And just being a person of Caribbean descent and knowing having conversations with people of Caribbean descent, when they talk about hip hop, they really only talk about the most mainstream hip hop artists or the most mainstream hip hop songs. So it gives them access to artists who are, on the cusp of blowing up, that are still, still might even be in the major label system, but they're like, they're not Kendrick or J. Cole or Nicki Minaj or Kanye. They're like a step below them or two steps below them. Not below them, but you know what I mean? Like right
Yeah,
there.
there's, as the kids say, there's levels to this shit. No,
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. You know, that's a great point. So first of all, we are and have been the number one music streaming service in Jamaica for years now. Shout out to Tanya Lawson, who is our head of Caribbean. She understands that market like no one else. We made a change a few years ago, right? Because to your point, um, if you are using Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon, by and large, no matter where you are globally, your experience on that service is not going to be all that different. Meaning, if you are in Germany or France or Italy, you're still going to be seeing Taylor Swift
Mm-hmm.
and Drake and Sabrina Carpenter, right? And we thought to ourselves, how can we
My
change
gosh.
that user experience, right? Because if you are in Jamaica or Haiti or Nigeria or Kenya, um, you should want your experience with the DSP to feel personalized to you. You want to see artists who look like you and make music that sounds like what you enjoy and is being played in your backyard. And so, our recommendation engine in our trending section last year was changed and is now dependent on geolocation. It's a hyper personalized localization, meaning wherever you are in the world, your experience with the app is going to be fundamentally different and tailored to your location. And that's a change that we've already seen has made a huge dividend in terms of length of listening time, number of new artists, profiles followed. It suggests resonance, like stickiness, which is what every artist should want on the receiving end.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, thank you for that. Thank you for contributing to the diaspora in that way.
Our pleasure.
I would say over the past 10 years, we've heard all the conversations about how streaming platforms rob artists because you need something like 1,500 streams to equal one sale. And then that sale is the worth of that sale is like varying fractions of a penny based on whatever DSP we're talking about. But it's not like, prior to streaming, artists made much money from record sales anyway. So, and as for the average artist with a standard contract, what is the monetary difference between going gold and platinum in the streaming era compared to going gold and platinum in the digital download and physical era?
Well, it's certainly more difficult, right, now than it was before. At the same time, on the consumer side, it was much more difficult back in the day. To your point from earlier in this conversation, buying music was an errand, right? You had to go out of your way to go to the store, in some cases on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., wait in line before the store opened so that you could get a physical copy. And so I think it certainly meant more back in the day because it was just more work than it is today. We have access to practically every piece of recorded music in history available on our smartphones in our palms at the touch of a button. Um, I very much dislike the focus of social media on first week sales
Yeah,
and streams
man.
and accolades. Um, Almost as much as I dislike the way that analytics has
In
been,
sports.
yes, um, it has led to, like, I grew up a huge Chicago Bulls fan from Chicago. Obviously,
As you should.
blessed to watch Michael Jordan's entire career. Um, it could just be that I'm getting older, but the way that analytics has got its tentacles into the game,
Yeah,
uh, I don't want to say it's unwatchable, but it's not the game I grew up
yeah.
watching, and it's just not as enjoyable to
Back in
me.
my day.
Yeah, I became the old man. Get off my lawn. Uh, but we're seeing the same thing happen in music, right? Artists will release a new album, and they'll immediately be attacked on social media if the first week or first day uh, stream sale equivalents aren't up to snuff. And typically those standards are based on standards that were set in the physical era. It's apples and oranges. You can tell I'm getting frustrated even talking about it because I see it every day. I talk to artists every day, and it's not helpful to the artists, which is why anytime I offer commentary on it on Twitter, like you, I do not refer to it as X. It's to shape the conversation positively because there's so much negativity. But in a roundabout way to answer your question, um, the focus should not be on plaques or RIAA certifications. But if you are fortunate enough to earn any of them, it is a tremendous accomplishment because it is not easy.
Yeah. And then, you know, with everyone sharing their commentary on the music business, and because all these platforms share like first week sales, people will compare someone's first week sales to someone else's, and they'll be like, "Oh, Kendrick sold 200 something, 200 something thousand the first week," and then someone would be like, "Drake sold 500,000." Laughing emoji, right? Or you talk about even smaller artists where they'll talk about their sales, but it's like you have to take into consideration. All right, before you say something is a flop, you have to take into consideration how much money was put into the music, right? And I feel like if they doubled, they doubled what they put into the budget, or they doubled whatever they paid for with the album, then I don't consider that a flop at all. Even if it's low numbers to you, um, that's all relative.
People discuss success as far as album releases are concerned, like they discuss opening weekend box office with Hollywood, and
Yeah.
it's not comparable. We know historically that most films, in order to be deemed successful, right? So not just make their money back, but be in the black, right? They have to have a big opening weekend. They have to have a big first week.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be a drop off in that second week, but it can't be too much, or else it's going to suggest that the third and fourth week there isn't that resonance, right? That's not how music works anymore, and it kills me because so many artists, it's a slow burn. There really is limited pre-release marketing, right? There isn't this big campaign to get people out to the box office. No, it's like once the music's out, it makes more sense to invest more heavily in marketing it
Yeah.
because then when you capture someone's attention, you can activate them immediately. Meaning, oh wow, this is great. I wonder if the album's available. Oh, it is available.
Yeah.
I can stream now, and hopefully, if they don't take the music down forever. This idea that something is a flop really gets me too, because there are so many factors to take into consideration, right? So did they release any music off the album prior to the album, right? Were there any singles leading up to the release?
Exactly.
How long is the album? Is it 10 tracks? Is it a Chris Brown 50 track
Yeah.
Odyssey, right? Um, are they signed? Are they unsigned? If they're signed, what was their marketing budget? Where is that money being allocated? Did they do any bundles with physical CDs or limited edition vinyl or merch? Because that impacts those numbers as well. There's so many factors, including, and we don't talk about this enough, how many guest artists are on your album that are listed as co-primary artists, meaning the songs off that album appear on the other artists' Spotify profiles at the very top, which is sort of meant to game the system beyond what you would hope would be organic collaboration. So it is always apples and oranges, and the direct comparisons are fraught.
And also, you have to take into consideration that movies don't stay in the theaters forever. Like movies probably stay in the theaters for up to 2 months.
And
Where
then they're on
Yeah,
direct to video. Yeah.
exactly. So with music, I mean, even during the physical era, uh, the CDs are still in the store, like, well, for months. years, when they reissue them. Um, and sometimes it takes years for an album to go gold. Sometimes it takes years for an album to go platinum. I mean, it took it took Reasonable Doubt like 10 years to go gold, just to go gold. And nobody was saying back then, oh, it only went gold, or like, or devaluing music because of you don't feel like it matched up with capitalism enough. I don't know. It,
Yeah.
it's interesting how we force ourselves to care about things that have nothing to do with what we personally like.
Yeah, I have my doubts too, Akil, that they even do care. I think a lot of it is just typical social media content aggregation,
Yeah.
right? So, like someone, I find it hard to believe that most people are that invested with everything going on in the world
Hmm.
in artists' first week sales. Like
Yeah,
it's mostly performative.
it is. Yeah, it's like you just react to like a post that one of these music platforms put out, and you, I don't know, just decide to say something negative, troll in whatever way. Um, I actually wanted to go back to our discussion about, music, Audiomack being one of the biggest platforms, streaming platforms in the Caribbean and in Africa. Um, you ever thought about opening up a office in Jamaica? Due to, because I know you guys have an office in Nigeria.
We do. We actually are in the process of moving into a bigger space in Lagos.
Wow.
8 of our team members on the ground in Nigeria work out of that office across social media, content strategy, business development, and content operations and artist label services. We thought it was so important to be on the ground, not this foreign company operating offshore, right? To
Yep.
really understand the plight of the user and the creator, you have to be amongst the people. You have to be visible. And so artists could come by and
Exactly.
meet our team, film content, shake hands, develop relationships. To answer your question on opening up an office in the Caribbean, it's definitely been discussed. Tanya, who I mentioned earlier, who heads up our Caribbean content strategy and curation, she's headquartered in New York, where our offices are. But she's from Jamaica, and she's
Yeah.
down there all the time. I mean, she's a big deal down there. She's a superstar
Yeah.
in Kingston.
Yeah. And your office is being located in New York help as well, because New York is basically Jamaica in America.
It is, and a lot of the consumption of Caribbean music outside of the Caribbean is happening in North America, in particular New York and Toronto.
Exactly. Yep. Um, Audiomack is a business that, you and your partners are, you're clearly involved in big business. You've done so many different kinds of license agreements and with the record labels. But in the business of technology and art, not only do you have to have a business mind, but you also have to be creative. What do you think is a percentage or ratio, if you could actually put a number on it, of creativity and business when it comes to Audiomack?
It's probably 50-50. Something that I highlight all the time that sort of blows people away. There are a handful of employees at Audiomack who are themselves creatives and amateur musicians. I'll give you an example. Our VP of product, his name is Charlie Kaplan. He oversees the actual product, so our user-facing apps and our creator app. Um, he's a musician. And so a lot of what we've built into the product is with the artist in mind because the person overseeing it themselves is an artist. To understand how to build a great product, you have to understand what the user and the artist is looking for. And to have that expertise on this side is extremely beneficial. We have employed DJs and producers. I mean, I DJed in college, and recording artists. And so we believe in the building, there's that creativity because there is that passion for helping artists because we have artists in the building.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You want to represent artists on a business level so they can see themselves in people who are, you know, I guess technically suits. Um, because that's what a lot of artists look at people in, in businesses and corporations who are, have power over the distribution of their music.
Yeah, I am far from a suit. First of all, I rock a sweatshirt and sweatpants every day. I want to be comfy while I work. I'm
Yeah.
also probably one of the most accessible executives in the space. I try to reply to as many people who reach out to me as possible, even if it has nothing to do with Audiomack, just because that is the value that I want to bring, and that is the association that I want our brand to have in this space. And it actually does ruffle my feathers, so to speak, when we get clumped in with the rest of the industry. We are on the outside looking in,
Yeah.
in some ways. We are not a publicly traded company. We are not a Silicon Valley startup. This was five guys who love music, who identified a problem in the marketplace 13 years ago and aimed to create a solution. And here we are now, continuing to try to innovate and improve that solution.
Hmm. Uh, when people say streaming isn't fair, like what do you say to that?
I can understand their frustration. Streaming as an industry was created to curb piracy. It was never created to ensure that anyone who ever wanted to pursue a career in music could get paid to the degree that they would be able to pursue this as a full time occupation. Their angst, however, should not be directed at DSPs. Should be directed at record labels and rights holders, who, by and large, control the agreements and the percentage at which artist payouts are calculated.
Yeah.
And so when I hear artists complain who are signed to a label, I get it. It's very likely, though, that more often than not, they signed a very bad deal
Yeah.
and the label is making the lion's share of their revenue. And the reason they're not seeing the money has nothing to do with us. It has more to do with their arrangement with their record label.
Yeah. I think that a lot of artists might have a lot of I don't know how to put this, like retroactive anger, like at themselves because of things that they, something that they may have signed. And I could understand that. But you know, it's hard. I mean, I think it's hard to place blame on people because I think everything that happens is just a reaction to the world that we're in and how we consume things and trying to keep up to date with technology and just the changing world.
I
I,
mean, yeah, could there be a better payout system? Could the rates be higher? Absolutely. And we continually try to innovate our product to open up new revenue streams to afford artists the opportunity to bucket non-royalty bearing revenue on top. For example, we introduced a feature called supporters several years ago, which allows fans to purchase a badge memorializing their support for a given song or album. There's six badges, all with a different price point. I think the lowest end is 50 cents and the highest end is $50. Now, artists have the opportunity to do nothing and still rake in funds because this exists passively on each page. Artists also could run campaigns and offer something of value, tangible or otherwise, in exchange for badge purchases. For example, you ran a campaign, you said, anyone who buys a badge, whether it's the 50-cent badge or the $50 badge, I will preview my new song for you, or I will offer you a discount code for my next merch drop. And that revenue is then bucketed on top of the royalties that are generated for those who stream the music. And so there's other creative ways that other DSPs are also looking into to generate more revenue on top of just streaming the music. Everybody's trying.
Yeah.
We understand the difficulty. That said, and for anyone who's watching, I'll probably get some hate for this comment. It's always been really hard to monetize art,
Yeah.
um, not just music. It's always been that way. There's only so much time that consumers have for entertainment, whether that be music, Netflix, podcasts, audiobooks, video games, etc. And now that everything is available on demand at the touch of a button, it's become even more difficult. And so, anyone who's struggling, I get it. I'm doing everything I can to help them better understand how to navigate this business. But the finger should not solely be pointed at the DSPs for that. We're trying.
Yeah. I mean, not only is there so much content out there, and there's so much there's just so much to choose from, but there's so much artists, uh,
Mhm.
so many artists, so much to choose from, and I feel like people, I think we're at the late stage of people kind of feeling overwhelmed by all the things that we consume, whether it be on YouTube or all the music that is released on Fridays or Tuesdays now sometimes. um and all the streaming, all the movie and TV streaming services as well. Like I think people are burnt out, especially post pandemic with information. So
There.
how do you navigate that as an artist, um when there's so much? How do you have to be creative enough, you have to be innovative enough, you have to have something about you that will separate you from everyone so that you can get just a little bit in the door, not even like fully.
Yeah, it's tough to navigate, no doubt. And I spend an inordinate amount of time trying to help artists do just that, which is figure out how to best navigate this ever-changing landscape. I think probably the most uh, common misconception is this idea that you need to make music for everybody.
Yeah.
We are officially in what I call the niche era, which is find your lane and appeal to that audience. If you're trying to make music for everybody, you're going to have a very difficult time growing a fan base and building an audience. And I separate the two because they're not the same. So figure out who your target market is and appeal to that market in everything that you do, in the music that you make, in the content that you craft to support that music, in your voice on social media, in your branding, in your aesthetic. Make sure everything is hyper targeted. In a way, think of yourself as a small business because that
Yeah.
is what you are. And any successful small business, they need to understand first and foremost, who are they selling to? Who
Yeah.
is buying their goods or services?
And in business and in art, just like life, you can't be everything for everyone.
Mm-mm.
So you got it. And if you think you can be everything for everyone, you're just gonna have a lifetime of disappointment and sadness because you just can't cater to everyone. And I think a perfect example of that in rap recently is the rise of Griselda. They are men who have experienced everything under the sun and stuck with it with all their trials and tribulations, and built a career in music in their 30s, well into their 30s, right? Making the music really, the same songs over and over again, right? And just catering to an audience. And a lot of people, people talk about it, but I still think people will always seek that just universal validation. I don't, even with all of these niche artists. I think that the average person still thinks you have to be everything for everyone.
Well, if they're watching this podcast, hopefully that notion is dispelled. The Griselda example is appropriate. You know, they identified what their audience is looking for, and then they're super serving their audience. And that audience is rewarding them because they don't just stream their music, they buy physical copies of their music that are available in limited supply. They purchase merch to support those artists. And when those artists are on tour, they're in the building. And
Hmm.
so when you get that level of support to supplement the streaming, because their first week streaming numbers are not all that impressive, to be
Yeah.
frank. But they have all these additional avenues for revenue generation, which has afforded them all the opportunity to make music full time and to be as creative as they want to be, which is something I would assume every creative desires.
Yeah. Yep. Uh, Speaking of Griselda and artists who have been independent for a while, I don't know when this started, but I am I might have an idea of who and what I can attribute this to, but it's become very sexy to say that you're an independent artist or I'm staying indie, but being an independent artist means exactly what the word independent means. Can you explain to inquiring minds such as myself and others what it takes to become a successful independent artist? 'Cause I'm sure you deal with them all the time.
Yeah, I mean, first we have to differentiate between independent and DIY. DIY is do it yourself.
Yeah.
If you're an independent artist, you're best served not attempting to do it yourself because that is a fool's errand. It is very difficult to make it in any creative field, let alone music, by yourself. There's nothing wrong with having help. I think that in this social media discourse age, artists who have teams but are independent get talked down on. Like, oh, well, you say that you're independent, but look what you achieved because you have this booking agent and this manager and this publicist. Like, yeah, man, I need some fucking help because
Exactly.
this shit is difficult. Um, it's very hard to define what is and isn't an independent artist today, if only because, you could work with a distributor. I mentioned a few earlier in this
Exactly.
conversation that happen to run through a major label system, but that major label is not affording you any services, right? You're literally just using their pipes, and that's how the music pops up on DSPs. So
Yeah.
their involvement in those capacities is nil. You're still completely on your own. To me, it's very clearly defined. Others might have their own definitions. Independence today means you own at least 50% of your masters. Hopefully, you own it all and you're licensing the music. And you have full creative control and autonomy over the direction of your music and when it's released. If you check those boxes, to me, you're an independent artist.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it has changed. I think once we started learning about the deals that Master P and Birdman signed in the 90s, everybody, I guess that was like the blueprint of what an independent artist is, and people carrying that into the 2020s. But it's just not the same anymore. And I think even with them, I mean, they had licensing deals with labels and they own most of their music, to my understanding.
Cash Money still does. Cash Money initially signed a distribution deal with Universal Music Group. Their music is now licensed through Republic Records, which is owned by
Yeah.
Universal Music Group. They have 100% master ownership in the entirety of their catalog. The label simply takes a cut to handle distribution and label services, which is a model that continues today for plenty of smaller labels and artists who renegotiate and re-up with their labels under roughly the same terms.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of labels, I feel like a lot of labels are signing artists to similar deals like that now, even artists who don't have as much leverage as, you know, Juvenile had in 98, you know. Um but I guess when people see that, yeah, you're independent, but you still use major distribution, they kind of look at it iffy. But I mean, you got to still understand what these words mean, what these terms mean relative to a certain industry.
Yeah, and as I'm sure you've seen on my Twitter, I talk about this ad nauseum because I get why the label system is painted with the brushstrokes that it is. Historically, these organizations have taken advantage of creatives, in particular, young Black creatives. And so there's this thought process that, all right, this is how the business works. And it still is true to a certain degree, but there are a wealth of opportunities that now exist for young artists that never existed before. And that was necessitated based on the changing landscape of the music business. Because of independent distribution, there are now a multitude of avenues that an artist can take in order to get their music out into the world. And the major labels over time saw that their market share continued to decrease as independent market share increased. And so they had no choice but to change their approach and offer licensing terms, not just to small independent labels, but to individual artists, because otherwise those artists could go elsewhere and someone would offer them those terms.
Yeah. That actually makes me think of another question because I'm looking at your background with all those the album covers, and I see Tyler the Creator, and know I learned recently within the past few years what the term upstream means.
Mhm.
And I guess Tyler's a good example of that because he was with Sony Red for like his first few albums, which was so owned by Sony, and I guess it got turned into the Orchard, I believe. And now he's on Columbia, which is like a flagship label of Sony, right? So
Correct.
how does that happen? How do you is it like performance based?
In some cases, yes. So if you do a distribution deal with a distributor that is owned by a major label, there are terms that are likely part of your agreement that would allow that distributor, if you reach a certain threshold or benchmark, right? So whether that be total streams or monthly listeners, some consumption benchmark where you would have the opportunity to be upstreamed to one of their what we would call frontline labels. We also have seen several major labels very quietly start up their own distribution arm where they sign artists to short-term licensing agreements, maybe a 1+1, meaning like one song with the option for a second song, or one EP with the option for a second EP. Then there's like a 6 to 12 month exclusivity window wherein they would have first rights if another label came calling.
Hmm.
And in those instances, they could upstream you to the label, wherein they would provide you with label services, which would include digital marketing, commerce, which is pitching to DSPs, sync, depending on the artist, perhaps radio. Depending on the artist, this is a great situation, right? If you have a record that takes off, the worst thing that could happen is you're caught flat footed and you cannot capitalize on the momentum as it's happening in real time. In one of these deals, you already have a partner ready to go if a fire starts. And then once that fire starts, you have them available to throw gasoline on that fire and hopefully, blow shit up.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for explaining that, man. And I know it could be very complex to people because I think, people think about record labels, they think, the big name record labels, but it gets very complex and intricate when you talk about this company owns this company that owns this company. So, but yeah, I mean, um, I do like how it's kind of become a little bit more, it's the right word is democratized in a sense for smaller artists to still use the major label services or use major label distribution. Um,
Mhm.
but so they have the access that all the big artists have, um, even though they're not as big. So, thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome.
Can you explain what a licensing deal is, between a record company and a streaming company and streaming service like yours?
Sure. So when a record label has a licensing agreement with a DSP, they are giving that DSP the right to make their repertoire, albums and songs, available on the service for a specific audience in a specific set of territories for a specific length of time. So, for example, we just recently announced that we renewed our licensing agreement with Warner Music Group, and it now has expanded by 47 additional territories. So now their music is available for over 50 territories globally, both for ad supported users and Audiomack Plus users, which is our subscription offering. So no matter what tier you're on, if you are in one of those territories, if you had the Audiomack app on your phone, you would be able to listen to Warner repertoire.
Mm, okay. Um, and I also want to talk about algorithms, right? Because with all this access to information, people know all these terms now. Terms have been around for a while, but people have a better understanding of how things are distributed and how we access information now. So, what do you think of the pros of algorithms? Even though they're getting so many critiques, like what do you think are the pros of algorithms?
Well, not all algorithms are created equal. They're all proprietary and unique to the individual service or platform that develops and implements them. I can't speak broadly to them, but I could tell you based on what we do at Audiomack, we put a great amount of emphasis on geolocation and listening history. And it's weighted, right? Because if it's only based on listening history, what we've seen is the user ends up in an echo chamber and they only continue to consume based on what they previously consumed. So it doesn't really expose them to different artists and different genres
Yeah.
across the world. When you include geolocation, however, it feels more personalized and tailored to that individual. And I could tell you that on Audiomack at least, recommendations are wildly popular. In some instances, significantly more popular than editorial playlisting, which we put a great amount of emphasis on as part of our mission to continue human curation. So it's about finding a balance and then looking at the numbers to determine whether or not the audience is utilizing the feature as you intended for them to.
Yeah. Well, speaking of algorithms and people getting access to things outside of their echo chamber, there's been a lot of talks about industry plants, and everybody, that term's been widely used. And I have a definition of what an industry plan is, but I think everybody's definition is different. Do you think industry plans exist? And if you do, what is an industry plan?
They used to. Uh, at DJ Booth, we had written a few exposés on the concept of the industry plant. Former managing editor Nathan Slavic once termed it Mindy, right? You're a major label signed artist that is masquerading as an independent, Mindy. And in some cases, that still exists, right? An independent artist achieves some modicum of success. They get approached by a major label, and collectively they agree it's in everyone's best interest to keep this relationship under wraps.
Mm.
And so the artist moves forward, operating as if it's just a grassroots endeavor when they really are being backed by this behemoth organization that has a seven-figure marketing budget, right? That I don't like. I think that it's misleading And then once that information gets out, and it always gets out, the artist often bears the brunt of it,
Yeah.
right? You lied to us. We believed in you. Everyone likes to feel like they were a part of a movement, but then when you find out that the money was responsible for the movement, it loses the luster. Um, to me, though, industry plan as a term, specifically on social media, because I have conversations in the real world every day, and no one talks about this shit. It's being weaponized as an insult to suggest that there's no other way to rationalize an artist's success
Yeah.
if not for um, the money bags behind the artist, right? And it's a weak insult. It suggests a great deal of ignorance. It is incredibly difficult to break an artist. And the idea that all you need is a major label and a bunch of money to do that, well, then more artists would break.
Exactly.
Like 90% or so of major label signed artists don't even recoup their initial advance, don't see a second album on their deal. And so, does money help to break artists? Yes. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. That doesn't make someone inherently an industry plant. And often, Akil, the artists who are called industry plants, it just so happens that most people were late to the game and
Yeah.
that they have, 5, 6, 7, 10 years worth of catalog available online for the world to consume.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people who use that term are people who don't really like the discovery of music. Because if you
Mhm.
really love the discovery of music, you see an artist's growth. I've seen people say that Doechii is an industry plant or Sabrina Carpenter is an industry plant. I'm like, Sabrina Carpenter had like 6 albums, and this is just the album this is her breakout album. This is like an adult album. She was a Disney star, right? So she wasn't
Mhm.
in the realm of adult pop music. Doechii has like 2 hit singles prior to this mixtape that she dropped, Alligator Bites Never Heal. So but if you're not a person, if you're still relying on the radio to tell you what's a good song, you're not going to realize that there are artists who are putting out music, who have been putting out music for years and subtly growing their fan base.
Mhm.
So, the term industry plant, I don't know. I don't think we can still use it anymore, especially because these days we really see an artist growth like way easier than we would have 20, 30 years ago.
For sure.
Top of the year, is hot topic. It's kind of cooling off right now, but Leangelo Ball, Jello released Tweaker, which became a viral hit, and according to this was ridiculous to me because why is Shams reporting on music, but Shams Sharani of ESPN, a representative on behalf of his label Born to Ball Music Group, said that Jello signed a deal with Def Jam Recordings worth as much as $13 million with $8 million guaranteed. You quoted this and said a record deal is not an NBA contract. So to clarify, Ball signed a licensing agreement. $8 million is in advance on his future royalties. It is not a signing bonus. It is also highly unlikely the label advances Ball the full amount up front. So, according to your following tweets, it seems as if a licensing agreement is advantageous to the label and the artist. And historically, I don't think that's really been the case. Not for a long time. Uh, why would a record label sign an artist with really no catalog to such a non-restrictive deal?
Well, first off, I wish all parties the best in that relationship. It's very dangerous to sign an artist who is not a career act necessarily, who has very limited catalog in the marketplace, to any type of agreement that
Yeah,
is that expensive. That said, he has a huge following on social media, and Def Jam as a legacy label could absolutely use the um, cool factor and relationships that he has and maintains to their advantage. They're bringing him in, I believe, not just as a traditional signed act, but also as someone who can help them taste make and reach a younger audience. And so there's a bit of content strategy involved in this deal, I believe, aside from just his making music for them. I found it hilarious, though, the way that this was framed, as though it was a pro sports contract. Um, Advances in music are considered non-returnable, which means the label is taking a chance on you, and if you don't recoup, they cannot come back for that money. That said, advances are usually broken up over time, meaning you get a certain amount upfront upon signing, you get another amount upon the completion and submission of the record, and then if the label chooses to pick up an option, either for an additional album or EP, that would thus unlock an additional amount. So, theoretically, 8 million could be across a 4 to 6 album deal. I don't know if LiAngelo has 4 to 6 albums in him. No offense. That's a lot of artists don't see through to the end of their
Most artists don't.
agreements, right? So it's possible that maybe he pocketed a few $1,000,000. I don't want to speculate, but the fact that he was able to draw enough attention based on such a limited output, good on him. Like I wouldn't bemoan anybody who does that.
I just man, whatever. It's an opportunity, and I don't think there's an issue with it at all. And I watched their show, their family show on Facebook. They all dibble and dabble with rap. So I just imagine LeVar and his humongous big baller brand clothes in a late. It's just a funny image to me.
Yeah.
If he was there.
Akil, I do have to wrap up in a few minutes. I actually have a call with OVO Sound. I'm going to get the details on this new Drake P&D album here shortly. So
Okay, no, I'm looking forward to that. How long you got?
2 minutes.
Minutes? All right, cool. Yeah. So I just want to ask you, with Kendrick and Drake, I mean Kendrick and Beyonce having such a big night at the Grammys, they don't really need to win more Grammys. It doesn't really do anything for them financially. But what do Grammy wins mean for newer artists or first-time Grammy winners like Doechii and Sabrina Carpenter?
I think it's an incredible piece of validation. Doechii has like basically shared her entire journey with the world over time, and has been very forthright and candid about her struggles to make it as an artist and to achieve this amount of success after 7+ years of putting in blood, sweat, and tears. I think it's incredible validation. It also unlocks and opens a ton of doors for opportunities in the brand world, which is money that helps to offset, more meager payouts depending on what, her arrangement is between TDE and Capital. And so, yeah, for an artist like a Doechii or a Chappell Roan, it opens up a world of opportunity outside of music, the recognition that the Grammys give them.
Okay. And my last question, outside all of the platforms you've created for artists, as stated previously, you've created a large platform for yourself as on social media and a wealth of knowledge for your music business, for your music business expertise. As someone whose words and presence are a valuable resource, why do words matter to you?
Because seemingly by the day, they mean less to everyone else.
Hmm.
And with all of the discussion on defunding the Department of Education and the banning of books and the decision that social media platforms are making to allow for unregulated and unmonitored content publishing without guidelines or restrictions, words mean more now than ever before. And I could choose to complain about the way that the direction that the world is headed in, or I could be the change that I want to see in others. And that's why I pick and choose my words very carefully and why they mean so much to me.
All right, man. Thank you, Brian Zisook, for sitting down with me, man. Thank you for your time. I thank you for your, just everything you share and what you contribute to this landscape of music in such a creative and innovative way. And being like one of the most transparent executives out there.
Well, thank you for having me, Akil. I really appreciate it. I loved your line of questioning. It was very thoughtful, and I wish you the absolute best of luck.
All right, man. Thank you.